Mike and I are super excited to bring you another special bonus episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast. This time, we bring you a conversation with TikTok's global head of music business development and intellectual property rights, Ulla Oberman.
Right. And so, okay, Jason, I'm a little jealous, quite frankly, because I had to be in Dallas and I just couldn't make the interview, and I'm just bummed, to be honest. But I do know that Ulla shared his background in the music industry, including roles at Sony Music and Warner Music, and his transition to TikTok ByteDance.
That's right. He also emphasized the importance of music discovery on TikTok. He said that it serves as a starting point for listeners to explore new and old music, including Lil Nas X's Old Town Road, Fleetwood Mac's Dreams, and Nathan Evans' Wellerman, showcasing the platform's ability to revive older music and promote new artists.
And even though I wasn't there, I do know that Ulla highlighted the evolution of user-generated content, that's UGC to you and me, in the music industry, pointing out its potential as a significant revenue driver and fan engagement tool, plus TikTok's new Add to Music feature, allowing users to seamlessly add songs to their playlists on various music services directly from the app.
Right. Ulla noted the launch of TikTok charts in several countries, including TikTok Billboard chart in the U.S., to highlight trending music on the platform and the impact of TikTok on music consumption that directly leads to increased engagement on streaming platforms and really a deeper exploration of artists and genres. So now, without further ado, here's our bonus episode, a conversation with Ulla Oberman. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Ulla, so great to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Great to see you too, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Ulla, you've had a long career in the music business. Our paths have crossed over the years. Talk about how you got to TikTok.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, by the way, I do remember trying to think who the artist was, but I remember being in a meeting with you way back in the day. I ran the music category for Walmart.com. So we had just launched the e-commerce part of Walmart, and we were trying to figure out physical fulfillment of music for Walmart.com. And I remember, coming and seeing you, and you were pitching me a bunch of great music. So hopefully we sold some of that for you. But anyway, the more kind of recent part of my career, which gets me directly to TikTok and ByteDance. So I had been in digital business development and strategy roles. I was EVP of Biz Dev and Partner Development at Sony Music for many years. And then I went over to Warner Music and I was Chief Digital Officer there. And this was right at the time that Musical.ly was taking off and becoming something that the industry was paying attention to. And it was definitely like, we'll almost come full circle on it as we continue to talk. But it was sort of the early days of the creators, lip syncing and dancing to their favorite songs, which then created visibility and got those songs seen and heard, and in some cases made them popular, but at a much smaller scale, obviously. But we had a deal with Musical.ly. ByteDance acquired Musically, and Musically became the platform which then was turned into TikTok. That's how ByteDance launched TikTok. So I had a lot of dealings with them because we had licenses with Musically, and we had to talk about how we were going to work on those licenses and move them over to ByteDance and TikTok. So I got invited out to China a couple of times, and met some of the ByteDance executives there, kind of the early days crew. Many of whom are still there. And I remember when I went, I think it was the second time I went, they really sat me down and talked to me about Douyin, which is the TikTok of China, right? And that had been live for a couple of years already, so there was a head start, and it was big. It had a big audience. It was pretty sophisticated in terms of how the For You feed works, et cetera. And I was really jet lagged a few days while I was in Beijing, and I would just scroll on Douyin, and the music was Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, like almost all Asian music. So I could not understand a single lyric, and I did not know a single song or band, but I came out of there with like 5 or 6 songs absolutely imprinted into my brain. Like I was completely hooked on a few of these songs. I remember there was I'd say the best moonwalker I've ever seen. There was this kid, a Chinese kid, who would do these moonwalking videos with these songs, and I kept getting those in my feed, and he had great songs that he was making these videos to. So my takeaway from that was, this is a big deal. Like if this, kind of travels on TikTok the way that I've just experienced it on Douyin, this is going to be a whole new frontier of how we market and promote and drive discovery of music, and fast forward, I've been at TikTok about 5 years now. So fast forward 5 years. And I think, that's exactly what has happened, is like we have become a pretty incredible platform for music discovery. So yeah, I kind of, I saw that happening, or I believed it was going to happen when I was there. And then one thing led to another after a few of those visits, and I decided to, go over to ByteDance about 5 years ago.
Wow, so much has changed since you and I first met. Talk about some of the biggest developments in the music industry just over those 5 years that you've been with TikTok, ByteDance.
Yeah, right. I agree. So much has changed. Well, some things haven't changed, right? It's still about amazing songs, amazing artists, connecting those songs and those artists to the right audience and exposing them to the right audience. And that will always be the heart of, what the music business does and how we connect music to fans. But I think how we do that and how it gets there and how it travels, that's what has changed so much. So I think there's a lot of ways to dive into this question, but maybe starting with just UGC, user generated content. So when I was at Sony and Warner, I spent a lot of time working on and thinking about UGC and like what was that to the industry and what could that be for the industry. And I had a really, kind of aggressive position on it from the beginning, meaning I thought it could be a big business, a big revenue driver, a big kind of way to engage the fan and the artist or the song. But in the early days, UGC, when we talked about it, it was mostly about YouTube, and it was mostly people uploading premium content onto YouTube, right? So UGC really meant someone, had a live clip of an artist performing, or maybe they just had the premium music video and they uploaded it, and that became a major sort of consumption driver. You weren't yet seeing that much actual like tampering with sounds negative, in a positive creative way, where people actually use their own creativity. The fan uses their creativity, and they remix or speed up or slow down or mash up or whatever it is that they're doing. So we weren't quite there yet, but we all saw, or certainly I saw, that was coming because the creator tools were getting better. The rights issues were still complicated, but we were starting to work those out, at least somewhat. Artists, this was actually really interesting. I remember at Sony and Warner, there were big lists of artists who did not want their music on YouTube because they did not like the idea of quote unquote UGC. Like they wanted their musical works to be presented to the audience in the way that they intended them to be presented, which was the recording that they made in the studio, or maybe it was a live recording, but they had chosen to release those as a product, right? And this kind of called all that into question because it was like, okay, that's the basis of the thing, but now the fan might do some crazy stuff with that song, and it might end up sounding quite different from how artist X intended it to sound when they were in the studio producing it, remixing it, putting the final touches on it. So I think UGC though has really come a long way, and I think about this a lot. Like I I'll age myself a little bit here, but when I was growing up, the way that I sort of exhibited my fandom was I would put mixtapes together, right? Like sometimes I would record them right off of the radio. Like I grew up in Long Island, WLIR would play a song, I'd love it. And the minute it started, I'd be recording and I'd put a mixtape together that way. Or I would, do it a little more professionally, but I would make a mixtape of all my favorite songs. And that was kind of my way of like getting more involved in touching the songs that I loved most. And then I would share those with friends or, a girlfriend or whatever it was. And like, you got to listen to this song. And I think today, a UGC version of a song, or maybe a whole playlist of UGCs of songs, is like for a younger music fan, that is like the mixtape. That is how they are demonstrating their fandom. And the difference is, I used to be able to make 10 copies of that mixtape and pass them out to friends. And now you can post that playlist or that UGC song, and you may have 100 million people, listen to it and love it, and they share it with other people. So all of a sudden the scale and the distribution is massive, right? So I think that is a really big development. I think we're still in the early stages of that, and I'm very bullish on like where that could go. I actually think it's worth bringing the AI conversation into this a little bit, because half a year ago, we were all kind of a little bit concerned maybe about, is this going to get away from us? Is this going to go too fast? Are we going to lose some sort of control around, how musical creation happens? And now I think where it's settling in, and it's still really early days, but the best sort of use cases that I'm seeing for AI are creator tools, like things that make it just a little bit easier to edit or remix or speed up or slow down or mash up, all these things that the fans want to do. So I think there's this great wave that will continue to come of music fans being able to, do things to make a song a little bit more their own. And I think that's the role that the first wave of AI will actually play, that will be hopefully, constructive and positive and like add value and not be a threat. So I think we've seen that for 5 years, and we're going to continue to see that, and then I think the other one that really comes top of mind, and this definitely started on YouTube and even some other platforms before or during the early days of YouTube, but the kind of audio visual part of music. I mean, really, you can take that back to MTV, VH1, and music video on television, but the scale of it now, that so much of music, has an audio and a visual component to it. And what TikTok has done and short form video has done, and again, this kind of gets back to the UGC part of it, is it's not just the audio visual of the produced music video. It is the creativity of pairing the song with the visual, whatever that may be, right? And that might be the band performing live, or the band, acting out some kind of storyline that is the song, or it might be, a guy telemark skiing in the Alps, but there's an incredible song that just happens to sync up really well to that visual, and the whole thing becomes amazing and really grabs you visually and in terms of the song, because you're pairing those things together. So that's also a big part of the UGC. Is it's not even just about remixing the song itself, but it's about how do you pair it up in an exciting way with the visual part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get to see a lot of these trends before most people do. And we were just talking about the trend of, the end user, the listener becoming part of the process and collaborating, and not only just speeding up, slowing down, but all of the different visuals that you just talked about. Talk a little bit about some of these trends that you see in engagement, consumption, of course, and just really sort of, I mean, I hate to put it like this, but consumer behavior, because you're sort of seeing those before anybody else does.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think, do you know what, there's kind of two levels of this. So the first level, I think, is really like what's the user behavior in terms of how they interact with music. And then there's the, are there certain trends in terms of the actual music that are really happening, right? So maybe we go at it from kind of both levels. So I think the first one is TikTok is, like, I think undisputedly an incredible place to discover new music. And discover new music means it's new music you've never heard before, or it's a song you loved 20 years ago, or it was released 20 years ago, but you weren't born yet, and now here you are hearing it I mean, it can mean all sorts of things, right? And this is a little sidebar, but I always loved kind of the Seattle, grunge movement, and like Alice in Chains is an example of a band that I really liked. But the song Nutshell? Yeah. So I had heard that, but it's been years and years and years, and it never I never connected in a deep way. Like, it wasn't a song I kept going back to like some of the others, like Mother Love Bone, Pearl Jam, it's Audio Slave, etc. And just last week I was scrolling, and just a guy sitting there looking into the jar, sort of like that album artwork, and that song is playing. And I think it just got me at the right moment. And I was just incredibly moved by that song. And now, I've added it to my Spotify playlist and Apple, and I'm listening to it all the time. But it was a song I knew. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And it just appeared at the right time in my TikTok feed. And it was like, wow, I just had this moment where I completely connected with the song. And I get very excited about that. Like, I think discovering a new song is really like a gift, right? I mean, we all go through life, we remember those little moments, certain things just touch us unexpectedly. And when you hear a song for the first time, or maybe you're rehearing it, but you're at a different place in your life, and it moves you, or it touches you, or you get goosebumps, or you start crying, or you start laughing, that's a moment. And I had that with this song, and I was actually like, I was grateful. I was like, that's amazing that I got to discover this beautiful song. So anyway, I digress there a little bit, but I think
no, but it's discovery and it's rediscovery, and like you just said something that was very important, and that is that it may be something that's been around for years or decades, but it's new to you, and that's still discovery.
Exactly. And this is also where we'll go there also a little bit later, because I think it's interesting to like the different, demos or age groups that are on TikTok and how they're interacting with old and new music. But those sort of macro trends in music engagement, business models, et cetera, I think TikTok is the starting point of the discovery. And then that leads to an ad on a playlist on a major streaming service, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, Melon, whoever it is, whichever one of the services it is that fan uses. It leads to, perhaps some engagement on YouTube or Vivo. It's like, let's go watch the full length video. We don't have those on TikTok, right? We're short form. So you find Nutshell by Alice in Chains. I go to YouTube and I'm like, I want to watch the full 3-minute video, and I'm going to do that here. It leads to looking on Wikipedia about, let me look up who this artist is if I've never heard of this artist, find out some more. It leads to just like a deep dive of the whole digital archive that exists around that artist, that song, that genre, that moment, that live show where a bunch of artists came together, whatever it is. Like, I think as you and I have been in the music business a long time, that's what we do, is we try to, get fans excited about songs and artists and moments and movements and genres. And TikTok has become one of the pillars. And I'm going to say this because what I do for TikTok, but I think we're often the starting point of it. But then it's got the tentacles and it goes to all these other places. And that's amazing, right? Like, that's what we want. We want people to engage in a deeper way with music. And I think TikTok really sort of kicks that off. So that's, when I think about music engagement and consumption, creation, again, going back to UGC, it's all those things around, these songs or artists that people fall in love with or kind of gather around. And it's happening, in this digital ecosystem that brings all these different platforms together.
Everybody is looking for that moment to initiate and get people to discover their music. Share some examples of some artists, some songs that are having success on TikTok, and why you think that is, because it's not something that there's a formula that you do A, B, and C, and you will have your viral moment. We all wish it was that easy. Right. As a music marketer, your job would be super easy.
Yeah.
But talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think the job of the music marketer has become more difficult because there's so much like power in the hands of the fans now. Like, they're the ones who are creating a moment and deciding. And, the marketers are awesome at what they do, and they might come up with a really clever way to try to sort of light the fuse initially or get the first little pops going, and then the fans jump on board. But it's much less predictable. It can happen, organically. It can happen in very surprising, unexpected ways. So there's a broader net that music marketer has to kind of be across in order to do his or her job these days, I think. But I think the way that TikTok, it's always been this way, but it's even more this way now. There is a musical community for any obscure genre, artist, song, festival, moment in musical culture. And frankly, I would even take that up a level and say TikTok is that for any interest that you might have. It doesn't have to be music. It could be cooking. It could be travel. It could be, knitting. It could be surfing. I mean, whatever it is, there is a community of people who are all over the world who are doing and posting and creating really cool shit around that interest, and they're connecting with one another. Think back to the Grateful Dead. Like, that was a community of people who were completely there was a social fabric around that band and that music, and those people around the United States following that band, and they shared set lists and bootlegs and mixtape, all, and this is like, again, this is like the digital version of that at scale of well over 1 billion people, right? That's what we're dealing with. So I think the starting point is, and it's all there. And it's just up to you as the user of TikTok to prompt TikTok with, a few searches or a few likes or a few shares or whatever it is, to let it know that you want to go deeper. And then it's up to you how deep you go at that point. It'll let you go as deep as you want. It's all there for you to explore, right? So I think that's kind of the starting point. But then if you I'll kind of go back over the last 5 years since I have been here. When I arrived, Lil Nas X, Old Town Road, that was the one, right? It was huge, and he was an unknown artist at the time, and he just had this monster song, and he very early on had figured out how to work TikTok, and he had an incredible image, and his sort of dancing and choreography and the visual part of that song was really compelling. So he was one of the first, or arguably the first, big artist to really break. Then, there's so many you could go into, but a next one that comes to mind, Fleetwood Mac Dreams. I think that one, Nathan Apodaca, the guy on Dogface was his TikTok handle, on his skateboard, and he's just cruising on his truck breaks down. He gets on his skateboard. He decides to sync it up to Dreams, and there was something about it. It just captured the mood, right? There was a vibe. Like, that's what everybody, like, there's a vibe to that video and that song and the look on his face, and he's drinking his cranberry juice on the skateboard. And it just like that became like a moment in culture. And Fleetwood Mac suddenly, like everybody's talking about Fleetwood Mac. I remember we measured the impact on streams and sales and everything, and it was massive, like huge renewed interest in that music off the back of that. So that was kind of when I was a year or so in. And then Sea Shanty, Nathan Evans. This was more UK, but it was a global thing as well. The Wellerman Sea Shanty, that became this massive trend. And obviously that's a pretty obscure musical genre that you're not going to hear played on Z100 necessarily. But all of a sudden, the whole world was like singing along to sea shanties. My kids are, I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they like.
Oh, sorry, we're having an earthquake.
You're kidding.
Holy. You guys okay? Sorry about that. The whole house is shaking.
Oh, yeah. You want to?
Oh my God. No, we're good.
So we were talking about Sea Shanty, Wellerman, Nathan Evans. The fact that this incredibly obscure musical genre suddenly becomes like almost like a pop culture phenomenon. And I don't know if you remember, but there were all these big rock and pop artists who were doing their version of the various sea shanties. And we also like that was one of the first times that we saw people getting really creative, where they would do like duets or even like multi-screen collaboration, where you'd have like almost like an orchestral version of the sea shanty with someone singing bass and someone singing, sort of soprano, whatever. So it just, again, the creativity around that was pretty incredible. And Nathan Evans, he got signed to a major label. He put out a record. It had some commercial success, especially in the UK. So it just took this genre into the mainstream. And that was a TikTok thing. Like, that was not going to happen organically on its own if TikTok hadn't been there to help get that distribution and, get that out there in front of people. I think one other one that comes to mind is there have been some really amazing songs and artists from Africa. So we had CK Love Nwantiti. I don't know if you remember this. This was probably 2.5, 3 years ago. Nigerian-born artist, and it's like this very beautiful melodic love song, and he was kind of happening in sub-Saharan Africa already. There was some success, and our guy who works in that market at TikTok, he was sending that around to our team around the world, and he was like, "This guy's incredible. This song's taking off. This TikTok's really working here." And then it just crossed over one day. Like all of a sudden, we started seeing it in the feed in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Latin America, and it went into the global Spotify charts, the global Billboard charts. He came and performed a gig pre-Brits, I think 2 or 3 years ago. He was selling out, mid-sized venues in like major Western markets. And it definitely started with that song just blowing up very organically on TikTok. And that most of those videos, it was him just performing and singing the song. It wasn't like there was some, major gimmicky visual part of it. It was just him as an artist. It's like kind of exhibiting his artistry through a TikTok video, and it just stuck. It just stuck with people, right? So, and then if I take it to the kind of here and now, I think like two things that have really caught my eye recently. So Charlie XCX has been an amazing, success story. And it's pretty fun. Like when I was at Warner, she was, signed to Warner, and we put out a few of her records, and they always had commercial success, but not like this one, right? I mean, this just became like a movement this summer. The whole Brat thing, obviously, and all the amazing mashups with like 360 and some of the other songs. This is one that I've really personally gone deep on, and there is like this underground community. Have you heard of this DJ and producer, The Dare?
No.
So he does his own music. He has a song called "The Girls" that's really good and catchy. So they're saying sort of like a sleaze rock genre. It has a little bit of an LCD sound system sound to it. And he produced a bunch of the songs on her album, and he is absolutely blowing up now. He's really got a personality. He just comes across really well on video, but then his music's also incredible. He's doing a lot of DJing with Charlie XCX. So he's kind of everywhere on TikTok. And there's some other artists as well who are kind of in that camp who you see similar things happening with. So, there's almost like this movement around her and her creative circle that is all happening on TikTok right now. So that has been a pretty amazing, sort of trend that we've seen over the last handful of months. And everyone said like, "Oh, is the Brat summer over?" And we're like, you know what? It's now becoming the Brat autumn, because it's still going. Like the numbers are still massive on the views and the creations and all the stuff that's happening there. And then, do you know the DJ set Kind of Musik? So they're out of Berlin. Kind of Musik means no music in German. And I guess the story is that these three guys were like struggling DJs back in the day. And one of the moms walked in and she said, that is kind of like, that's not music, what you're playing. And so they're like, that's our name, Kind of Musik. So they have become massive this summer. I mean, they've been on sort of the circuit, the DJ circuit for years, and they were very well regarded. They've had some huge songs, but this year kind of took them to another level. One of the guys always wears a scarf on his head and sunglasses. And there's a trend on TikTok right now where the users will put on sunglasses and scarves, and then they'll be, at the kitchen stove pretending it's a DJ deck, playing one of the songs and just playing along to it. So, and apparently now the sort of in real life version of that is if you go to one of their shows now, 5,000 fans show up and they're all wearing the scarves and the sunglasses. So it's like, yeah, it started out as this trend on TikTok and now it's, moved into sort of real life. But there's a song called Adam Port is one of the three members. And there's a song called Move, which I don't know if that rings a bell, but that's been huge on the radio charts this summer. It still is really big right now. So, they were always like an incredibly talented, credible DJ set. But I'd say this summer we saw them kind of move more over to the mainstream and, getting big radio play and chart success and a hit song. And I'm not going to say it was all TikTok. It happened in lots of different places, but it was a massive trend on TikTok this summer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think the summary of it is like, there's absolutely no way to predict it. You just don't know what's going to resonate. And I would almost like describe it in this way. Going back to what I said earlier, there are countless little communities around every song, artist, genre. And then there are just some that strike the right nerve and they just jump that sort of hurdle and they hockey stick up and suddenly there's 5 billion listens or, 100 million creates or these massive, massive numbers and they're traveling all over the world and the song is, successful all over the world. So that's kind of the way that we see it happening on TikTok.
I can't go to a meeting with an artist, manager, label, distributor without TikTok being part of the conversation in any marketing plan that we put together. I'd love to see what you think of, this new music ecosystem and how TikTok is evolving over these years for this new music business.
Two ways to think about the question. Like one is what are the things that we're building in terms of like the product and the experience on TikTok to continue to support music and artists. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And then the other is, how do we kind of work day to day with the industry, with a label, with a publisher in order to get their priorities or their emerging artists or their catalog that they're trying to, give a massive push to have a moment on TikTok. So I'll kind of look at it in both ways. So from a how are we building out the music ecosystem standpoint, one of the things that we're really excited about is we launched this past year our Add to Music app service. And for those who don't know what that is or haven't tried that yet, when you're in TikTok, in the bottom left corner of the screen, not always, it has to match with the song, and there's some other sort of complicated algorithmic decisions that go into this. But oftentimes now you will see a button and that will allow you to add that song into a music service. And the first time you want to use it, you're going to have to authenticate. Right now we have Spotify, Apple, Amazon integrated. There are a bunch more services just about to launch or launching very soon. So we're going to try to get very full coverage there. But once you authenticate, you then have a one-click experience where you can hit that button while you're on that video, listening to that song, and that song will add to a playlist in Spotify, Apple, or Amazon for you. So it's the way I describe it is it's like a Shazam within TikTok. Right? It's the same way that you can use Shazam and you add that song right into your Apple Music playlist. Here you're doing it, but we're going to do it across, all the services around the world. That's the goal. That's what we're working on. The team's working on. I'll give you one fun recent example. We did a really great partnership with Universal for Sabrina Carpenter when her album came out, and we had like a special sort of landing page that we built out for the album. And one of the buttons that we featured even a little more than it just being in that bottom left corner was the add to music app button. And on the biggest day, we had, I don't think we're sharing exact numbers yet, but we had multiple million ads of that song and album into the various music services, in one day, right? So you can, and it's still early days. We're still working this out, but like our goal is that we would make it absolutely seamless for you're discovering that song on TikTok. You don't even have to leave the site. You just hit one button and then it's saved to wherever you want it to be saved to. So you can go back and listen to the full length song later. Kind of going back to what I said earlier about this coexistence of all these different music platforms across, your phone or the internet. So add to music app is a real big focus for us. Another one that's worth talking about is charts. So we have launched charts in a number of countries and we're continuing to add more. We actually have a TikTok Billboard chart in the US. And, kind of twofold reason for that. The industry told us that so I don't know exactly where we lost one another, but we were talking about the, I'll just go on I'll talk about the charts again. Okay. I'll start there. Hopefully you can like splice it together. So the second major initiative for us is that we're really leaning into charts. We have TikTok charts, music charts live in a bunch of countries around the world. In the US, we have the Billboard partnership. So we have a Billboard TikTok chart, that's getting updated all the time, featured pretty heavily in the TikTok app and also, on various parts of the internet in partnership with Billboard, et cetera. I think the industry really likes that because it's a way for them, whether it's artists, managers, labels, publishers, they can all take a quick look and just see like what's trending on TikTok. Is there something I should be keeping an eye on? And you definitely see movement where it starts on that chart and then weeks or months later, it's on, the sort of quote unquote traditional Billboard chart, right? Or it's entering Spotify or Apple's charts. Like there's this definite sort of sequence where kind of back to what I was talking about earlier, starts on TikTok and then kind of the tentacles go from there and then it travels to all these other places once people start discovering it. So that's something we're going to keep, focusing on. We're going to build that product and feature out in other parts of the world. And we're going to keep trying to make it better and more interesting in the markets where it exists already. We're still really happy with our Sirius XM partnership. We've got a dedicated 24/7 TikTok radio channel with them. The on-air personalities are TikTok creators and the music that's played is stuff that's happening on TikTok. So much more kind of, early stage, undiscovered, independent music than they would probably play on all of their bigger sort of mainstream channels. And they're really happy with it. We're really happy with it. It's just a cool way to extend our musical influence into, tens of millions of cars and radio subscriptions for Sirius. So that's another thing we're excited about, and we're looking at other things like that. And then I'd say, couple of the sort of newer initiatives, leaning much more heavily into songwriters. So this goes back to what we talked about earlier with UGC. Like you think about it, the core of that, the musical work that people get excited about. Sure, they want to hear the performance by Bruno Mars or Ed Sheeran, but they want to take the song, the actual composition, and maybe do something interesting with it. So we're spending a lot more time talking to the publishers and to the songwriters and trying to get creative around how can we market the songwriter and the song, at the composition of the song rather than the recorded version of the song. We have a program that we launched recently called Behind the Song. We've done it with a handful of artists. There's a new one coming out next Wednesday. I can't talk about who that is yet, but really exciting young artist. We did Jack Antonoff recently, which was very cool. Obviously, he's got, his own incredible body of work, and he's written, huge songs with Taylor Swift and lots of other artists. So we just got to go kind of behind the scenes with him, and he talked about his creative process and, played us stuff that he loves, or kind of talked about how he came up with the idea for a certain song. And we featured all of that content. So that's our behind the song kind of campaign. And that keeps refreshing with, new exciting songwriters all the time. And then lastly, I would say e-commerce is starting to become really interesting. So TikTok has launched in the last year, a little more than a year, depending on which part of the world, in e-commerce business. And what we see really working in a kind of profound way that I think changes the way that people shop is you have creators who have a following or a community because they are sort of presenting content or around a certain field, and then perhaps they have certain products that they want to sell, or that their fans or followers want them to sell, that is in line with whatever it is that they're posting about or talking about. And so that was kind of the genesis of the e-commerce business for us. And it has become very, very large in some countries where it's been live for a while already. Like I'm talking, we're a significant retail outlet in certain countries already. So we've just started to do that with music product as well. There's one kind of case study, early days, but Meghan Trainor had new music recently, and she came onto TikTok and did a live. So she was actually there posting live and talking about her new music that was coming up. And in less than an hour, she sold 1,000 physical units, about half vinyl, half CDs, through the e-commerce channel off the back of her live. So it is literally the artist talking to the fans directly through a TikTok live channel, and then saying, if you want to buy my new album, you can do it right here. And, she sold 1,000 units in about an hour. So we think that's a great case study, and it can be vinyl or CD. It can be, merch. It can be a product line of makeup or fashion or shoes, or a collaboration with another brand. I mean, there's all sorts of places, obviously, that musical artists go with products that they'll get involved with. So we think there's a really big opportunity, and we're just getting started. But that will become a bigger and bigger part of like how we play. And then also we've got a bunch of kind of along those lines, we've got a bunch of ticketing integrations that we've done over the last year and a half. So we, sell tickets for artists all around the world through a bunch of major partnerships. And again, pretty early days, but like there are certain shows where we're selling, thousands or tens of thousands of tickets, or like a real significant share of a certain tour will come through TikTok. Usually it's when the artist really engages with us and like promotes that show directly through TikTok that we'll see it. Really spike, but it works when it's done correctly. So we think there's some big opportunity there. So yeah, I think, that is kind of the, how are we going to play in the music ecosystem? Like, how do we add more value for artists and for fans going forward?
Yeah. Well, I love the innovations, and I love the collaboration with songwriters, with the artists, and with these other verticals like merch and so on. So as we sort of wrap this up, tell me what you're most excited about, with TikTok's role in the music business, but also where it's sort of going in the next few years.
I think we will continue to be, incredibly focused on this discovery, and it starts on TikTok. And kind of back to what I said earlier, like that gift of finding a new song or artist or a piece of music that just moves you. Like, we want to be the place where that starts, where that happens. And we will build out, there's some interesting new product stuff coming that I can't talk about yet, but things that we're doing that will make that, kind of easier for the connection between the artist and the fan, easier for kind of discovery in terms of how you navigate TikTok or search in TikTok or get to different pages in TikTok. So that is something that we're hyper focused on. I'd say that's our number one goal, is making that better and better and better. A second part of that I'm really excited about, and I think about this a lot, is, TikTok is becoming an archive for musical discovery or deep dives or exploration. There is so much amazing content on TikTok, and it's all user uploaded content. So you're going to just get snippets of things that you or I would never have known exist, but someone captured it or found it somewhere, and then they decide to post it to TikTok. And because we get excited about a certain artist or song and we kind of, deep dive on it, we will come across that. So I believe that over the next years, TikTok will become, the most important kind of archive of all things music and musical history and musical culture and musical exploration. And that gets me incredibly excited, and building, again, a better sort of user experience around how people can really engage around that is very exciting. One other thing that I want to mention, and I've been, a little bit like on repeat on this topic over the last years, but I still believe that the role that commercial music plays in musical discovery, marketing, promotion, but also revenue generation is massively underutilized and untapped. When we have a separate musical library that is fully pre-cleared for our brand partners to use those songs when they make TikToks, which are their ads that they run on TikTok. And we see it where one of those songs starts to get traction with the advertisers, or maybe it's getting traction organically with creators and users, but then the brand sees it and they say, let's jump on that song, and they take it to a whole nother level. There's kind of a traditional analog to this. Like, a song used to get huge back in the day because Apple featured the Ting Tings and the Darkness, and I'm trying to think who the other
Feist. There were a bunch of them.
Exactly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exactly. So those songs, those were incredible songs that already had fans and had success, but being in that Apple commercial just took that to the next level. And so I think we can do that, but at scale in a way that people can't even imagine right now, but we're still working out the rights and the pre-clears and all that stuff. So there's still some hurdles, but we're making progress on that. But I'm a real believer that the kind of commercial use of the music can be really good to, create a bunch of revenue for the label and the artist and the songwriter, and also it's paid for marketing and campaigning for that song, right? Because the advertiser is the one who is getting the distribution and making sure that there's hundreds of millions or billions of impressions around that song. So those are a few of the things that are top of mind that get me excited.
That's a lot. Ula, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a fantastic conversation. Hope to do it again. Continued success. Appreciate you.
All right. Great to see you. Safe in the earthquake zone there, huh?
Exactly.
All right. Have a good day.
All right.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.